Well, Frank Sinatra is my idol. I think that he was the consummate stand-up singer, entertainer, and he had a sort of there was a magic about Frank Sinatra that you really don't see with too many people. In fact, hardly anybody had that kind of charisma. You know, he wasn't what you call a handsome man, but to the women he was. So you know, you can never quite figure out what that is, or what draws people to a performer. You know, but he had all of those things, and so I wanted to be like him. I know my 9th Christmas, there was an acoustic guitar at the end of my bed, and I started playing, and I learnt to play. There was a gentleman across the road who was a soldier. He'd just come back from Hawaii, and he had learnt to play Hawaiian style, which is really from, I think, the Spanish who came to Hawaii, taught the Hawaiians the guitar, and then the Spanish left, and the Hawaiians were left with these guitars, but they didn't know how to play them. So they invented their own tuning. And this tuning lives on today. It has, in fact, become very important just in the last few months. On world music, in fact, that I was watching the other night, they were highlighting this concept of this tuning. And I realized that I've been playing like that all my life. I think Dolly Parton plays the same way. It's an open form of tuning, yeah. And so I taught myself based on what this gentleman showed me, which was open tuning, and you bar, and you create your own chords that way. And that's why Hawaiian music sounds the way it does. Everly Brothers was a real favorite, and our sister, of course, brought the Everly Brothers home. She was 2 years old. She didn't bring them home physically, you know, which would have been nice. But she would bring Wake Up Little Susie, and I discovered jukeboxes and stuff like that. So I would go down and sit in the local coffee shop at 9 years old and play Wake Up Little Susie until the sun went down, you know, because the guitars I thought were amazing. And when you listen to it today, they still are, you know. How they recorded those guitars in those days, I don't know. But it was wonderful sound. And so the Everly Brothers and those harmonies that they used were more like bluegrass than anything else, but we didn't know that then. So it was a great influence. And you went by ocean liner, and you probably had 1,200 people on a ship, 5 weeks at sea, halfway around the world. You saw the pyramids. We saw the Suez Canal. We saw India, and I think I've said it before. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I really believe that was the fundamental basis of our imagination in songwriting, was seeing places like this at such an early age, seeing incredibly ancient places, being in the streets of Sri Lanka, and these exotic places you only read about in somewhere like Manchester, you know. And so I think that woke us up. It woke our imaginations up, and I think it's one of the things that makes us different. We found out there was a local speedway, another place where we might be able to sing. So we went down to the speedway. It was only about half a mile down the road from where we live. And there was a man sweeping up on the track, and we walked up to him and said, "Can we sing?" And so many things come to mind. And he said, "I don't know, this is a racetrack, you know, can you run at the same time?" So, no. He said, "Come back later on, come back on a Saturday night, and we'll see what can be done." And we did come back on the Saturday, and they were having stock car races, and they had nat car races, which are like those little tiny racing cars, but pretty fast and pretty dangerous. And we stood up on there was a microphone in the middle of the oval, and in between the major races, the last 2 major races, they allowed us to get up and sing on the PA system. This was the first time we ever sang outside to a large audience that had nothing to do with us whatsoever. You know, they came to see the races, and there's these 3 strange kids singing, you know, and they threw money on the track, which was wonderful. When not quite sure whether it was a compliment or whether they wanted to be run over, but we had to run out onto the racetrack and pick up the money, and I think we managed to pick up about £5 in coins, you know, and this was, oh my God, this is our first payday. one of the racing drivers, Bill Gates, who was a local DJ on Radio 4BH in Brisbane, came to visit us the next day and asked if he could promote us. In those days, they didn't use the term management. Could I be your promoter? You know, and we thought, whatever that is, yeah, sure. You know, I'll be your promoter and I'll get you on the air and we'll do some recordings. Wow, I thought, you know, this is amazing. And he had another gentleman with him called Bill Good. They were both racing drivers. Both of them had the initials BG. And that, along with our mother's initials being BG, my initials being BG, brothers GIBB being BG, he came up with the suggestion that we call ourselves the Bee Gees. But in those days, it was just BGS. And so we had he presented us with a guitar with the letters BGS on the bottom. And that's how the name was born. But later we changed it, you know, to make it 2 full words. Dad did the one thing that a lot of parents don't do. I see it with tennis parents. I see it with, he let us be the Bee Gees. He didn't try to make us into anything. He just watched us grow, and because the clubs and the hotels we were working in, we were too young to work in, it was his responsibility to be with us when we did those shows. Otherwise, we could not have done those shows. So he became our manager in that sense, and he was always the man that would pick up the check at the end of the night, and he would always make sure we got paid, and we used to drive sometimes hundreds of miles to do one show, you know. And one time we hit a cow on the highway and rolled the car, you know. There's been so many incidents of a grotesque nature, you know, that happen when you're doing this type of thing. Well, I think it's his music ability. It's as they say, it's in the genes. You know, whatever he was is really what we are. You know, I think that our father wanted to be famous. Our father wanted to be a big band drummer, and he had his own band. And I think he was able to live that through us. His kids, even if he didn't make that point, his children did, and he was there when it happened, and he nurtured us along, and that was his strength. His strength was just always being there, you know, always being there for us, always making sure that we looked right. Tell Robin to comb his hair. Tell Robin to polish his shoes, because that was that was the dialogue. It was always Robin. You know, he would always come and say, "Tell Robin to comb his bloody hair." You know, I said, "But Dad, you know, it's his hair. You know, he looks a bloody mess. You know, tell him to polish his shoes." You know, and so he was always on our case, and in that respect. We did a whole bunch of shows in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Australia, Japan. But the one particular show that stands out, obviously, is to us is Indonesia, because of the circumstances. They were so bizarre. I mean, they put us in a convoy through the city in Jakarta, sitting in the back of a car, open, with the army behind us, machine guns, everything. People waving at the side of the street in rickshaws and all this stuff, you know. So that was fantastic. And then the promoter turned out to be some Western guy, some English guy that happened to live in Jakarta and had been promoting concerts. And there was a monsoon coming, and we had a stadium with 70,000 people in it, and like a hurricane, you know. It was coming right through Indonesia. And the show must go on, you know. The promoter said, "Well, if the show doesn't go on, they're going to kill me." You know, this is the kind of country you're in, you know. You guys have got to do the show. So he said, "Oh, well, okay, we're all right. We'll do the show." But we didn't know about the rain at that point. And we got to the gig. There's 70,000 people, 60 to 70,000 people, and anti-aircraft guns right round the stadium. You know, we thought, what are they for? You know. And we never really found out, but we just realized that it was a dictatorship, and Sukarno was still in power, and his family was at the show. So we're backstage, and suddenly the monsoon hits, and must have been 70, 80 mile an hour winds, and lashing rain, and within 5 minutes the stage was in at least an inch of water, and we said, we can't go on. This is crazy. There's how many thousand volts of electricity on that stage, and we had a 30-piece orchestra. It doesn't look possible at all, you know. The promoter comes up to us and says, listen, this is the deal. If the group, if your support group goes on and they come off alive, will you go on? So, that's fair enough. You can't say fairer than that. It was an offer we couldn't refuse. We said, look, if you're willing to jeopardize someone's life, you know, I said, look, we don't think it's a good idea. And we could hear machine guns clicking all over the place. So, you know, they said, look, you can't not go on. You have to go on. So we ended up going on, terrified, walking through the water on the stage, 30-piece orchestra at the beginning of the show, 2 violinists at the end of the show. They just sort of evaporated throughout the show. It was fantastic. There was Bill Shepherd conducting, and at the end of the show, he's conducting 2 people. You know? And what we did was, in order to stay safe, is that we didn't go any closer to the microphones than that, because once you get that close, you're in real danger. And we were standing in water, so the whole show was terror-filled. You know, we didn't even know what we were singing. We just, let's get this over with, you know. But that was the story, unforgettable. I mean, every group, I think, should endure something like that, because that's where the resilience comes in. That's where you learn.